Welcome to Everything with Everett. This is a talk show podcast hosted by Everett McConaughey. The purpose of this production is to share thoughts, voices, and information to further a discussion on who we are as individuals, communities, and a global society. Everything with Everett is open to all topics of discussion: faith, science, history, finances, social issues, and, well, everything. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Visit everettpodcast.com for all the details.
Welcome back. I am once again with you, gracing your ears, and I thank you for pressing play, as always. I know you, the listener, are of humble means, just like myself. I pay for this podcast, the hosting fees, everything. So, you know, I appreciate you supporting an independent podcaster like myself. The regular listeners that you are, thank you very much. If you would like to show your support, you can do so in a non-financial way. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show on any platform that you are listening to it on. Also, if there's an option to provide a review of the podcast, let other listeners know why you like listening to me. You know, maybe it's my soothing voice. Maybe I just drone on enough to put you to sleep. You know, a positive is a positive, and I'll take what I can get. Okay? Thank you. So I wanted to do a podcast about something that's kind of been brewing in the back of my head for a little while now. And in all reality, it's kind of been brewing since 2020. It's literally the last 5 years in the making. So obviously in 2020, COVID hit and a lot of the world shut down. Companies closed. People suddenly were, getting essentially free paychecks to stay home and, take care of the greater good, not infecting people, caring more about their health. Some people have jobs that don't afford those kind of options, and they still have to come to work because presence is key to the success of their mission or company or whatever they're doing. Firefighters have to show up to house fires. They can't fight them from their couch. Police officers have to show up and, respond to car accidents and arrest people and break up fights in domestic situations. There are a lot of jobs that are essential and don't qualify or afford an opportunity to sit back and take it easy. Well, I worked for a company, nationwide grocer. I programmed alarm systems and monitored those alarm systems. I worked in a corporate office. And it was an actual large company that had a real IT department. There was physical building-to-building networks and physical computers on site you could remote into. So there was a lot of, IT infrastructure that could be utilized to leverage the situation. And when the whole corporate office that I worked in was sent home for COVID and, the welfare of others, they're basically like, hey, we shut down the corporate offices. We don't need to have any supplemental services, which looked good on paper and initially was fine and went unnoticed. But my department of 9 people was deemed essential emergency staff and regulated by the UL alarm standards of being staffed 24/7, meeting a lot of agency state restrictions across the country. We had alarm systems in, I believe, 37 states and jurisdictions, even states that there weren't any grocery stores, but we had manufacturing facilities, distribution facilities, and the like. For example, here in Pennsylvania, the dairy farm or the dairy plant that produces all of the milk and cheese products that are sold at this nationwide grocer that has a sparse, footprint right around the Philadelphia area. But in Hatfield, Pennsylvania is the heart of the company's dairy operation. And we had to monitor that alarm system all the way in Boise, Idaho. So, and now I live 20 minutes away from that system. It's crazy. But the part that kind of was like infuriating was we got forgotten about. There were all these surveys. How do you like working from home? Do you need office supplies? Do you need support? You know, they were providing the grocery store workers that were coming into the stores a hero bonus. And granted, I felt like they deserved that because they legitimately were coming in, minimal protections. We didn't know anything about this rampant virus that was killing people, hospitalizing people that had just a really low survival rate. So yeah, they're coming into a grocery store, you know, arguably to help a company profit and being paid, you know, a small amount considering the risk, to come in and risk their health to meet the needs of a grocery store. But we were corporate people. We didn't have any exposure really beyond ourselves and each other. So it was kind of a, you know, if you don't feel good, you know, make sure you call out. But also too many people call out, then we're weakened and kind of be responsible type of deal. We did have to do the temperature screenings, and there was a kiosk that was in the front door when we came in. Obviously no security guards anymore at that point. But with, you know, badge readers and mechanical door locks, you don't need, you know, physical security when you have a properly designed facility that actually has redundant security measures. And we'd come in, take our temperature. It would print out a thing that said you're okay, had your picture on it and the date and time, and you had to put that on your shirt, on your chest, so that when you're walking around the building, everybody knew that you were cleared for the day. And they could see it like on the security cameras and whatnot. Some people obviously bragged about, oh, I'm not going to do that, and da, 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 and they, you know, got in trouble for various things. You know, not necessarily that, but it was related to other bad behaviors. But yeah, they stopped supplying all the, you know, smaller office supplies because the accounting people were like, oh, the corporate offices are closed. We don't need anything. And then pretty soon we didn't have, you know, paper, toner, mail service, forks, spoons, the vending machines stopped getting stocked. Pretty soon all the comforts that we had of the corporate office were gone, but yet we were required to come into work. And so, you know, some people graciously spotted a few times, hey, here's a 200 thing of forks. And, you know, employees being what employees are, and every company, they've got these. People don't think about, you know, who actually sacrificed. And hey, I'll blow through 5 forks in one shift just because I'm having 5 snacks instead of being responsible and using 1 fork per day, you know. So eventually that failed too. But my point was that I was trying to get to, they didn't feel like they could have remote staff, even though the technology clearly was there. They could have, you know, scraped together some laptops, come up with, you know, program the computers. We could remote into the desktops to access the physical hardware on site. You could have had management be the ones that were on site physically. That would have met the UL criteria. And then we could have had, you know, people remotely through VPN connections, able to make phone calls and do all of the actual functions. So then you could really keep the facility running and the whole operation running, but then you'd have a redundancy of management on site that knew how to fix things, plus remote workers that actually handle the workload. Obviously the on-site staff could also jump in as needed too. But I was like, you really clearly could do this, but they didn't. There was no desire to. Frankly, it then later got admitted it was a little too daunting to them, so they just didn't really want to try. Basically, if it wasn't the idea of someone above them, they didn't really want to push for that route. So I was like, you know what? Working from home sounds great. I would you know, nothing worse than sitting at your job on a super slow day, twiddling your thumbs, trying to look like you still care, and thinking, you know, I could do this and that, and I could do laundry right now at home. Like, You could be so much more productive if you're not stuck in an office and have arguably more value in your life. But this company didn't do that. So I was, you know what? It was a trend to find better jobs. It paid more, and most companies were going the way of working from home. So it was kind of like, hey, you can actually have all the good things that you want. And it was kind of an employee's market at that point. So my stepdad passed, and the crazy part was I knew he was passing from cancer. I told my management team about it, and we just kind of played it by ear. I didn't want to also impose. There's no need for me to be sitting there the whole time and sacrifice tons of work hours when I can't do anything. But ultimately, the day he passed, I called out for half of it because things were looking bleak in the morning, but he was still hanging on. And stupidly, I'll admit this, I chose to come into work for the second half. I was like, you know what? Maybe false alarm. He's going to still be hanging on for a bit. I'll come back into work. And then I was like, hey, I asked my boss, I was like, I'll come into work since I know that, things are tight. My boss, even though he was salary, he, didn't want to give up all of his life to work. And so I was really kind of supportive of him in not having to sacrifice his own time. So I was willing to help accommodate and help the staffing, especially during a tight time. And so I told him, I was like, hey, I'll come in at this time to help out with the bulk of the shift that I was on. But I was like, when this person comes in at 9:00, I want to go home and go back to my stepdad's side because he's, not doing great. Boss said, sure, that's great. Everything's good. While I was at work, my stepdad passed. And then to compound, obviously, the feeling of being at work and hearing that your family member is gone and you were literally just at their bedside, 2 hours earlier, and kind of kicking yourself like, why didn't I just actually finish calling out for the rest of the day? I should have just never come to work. Like, now I'm trying to work and to be like, a family member's dead and my family's consoling themselves without me. The person that I asked, hey, when they come in, can I leave? And my boss was like, sure. That person was on vacation. I found out. My boss never shared that with me. And so guess what? I had to work till the end of the shift because nobody else was coming in and I couldn't just, abandon my job. So that was the last straw. I decided, you know what? Screw it. I need to better myself. I need to go to a company that actually invests in what it wants and its talent that it has, instead of being like, oh, you should be thankful that you're making $18 an hour, when I could easily pluck up a new job working from home for $22 an hour and potentially build the career that I wanted. So fast forward to, a week or two later, I was browsing LinkedIn and I found an online posting for an asset protection logistics specialist at a company that was, I Googled them, looked them up. They were based in Chicago and had been around since 2002, kind of a HVAC industry disruptor, selling to the general public in a groundbreaking way. And offering something that at the time when they started, companies weren't doing. They were just selling, bulk orders of air conditioning systems and heating systems to local distributors and installers, people that really kind of were using them as a supplier for the means of their industry. But this company wanted to take out the middleman, as it were, and sell straight to homeowners that maybe were, more DIY inclined, maybe the kind of off the clock HVAC professional wanting to do some extra side hustle, could do some side installs outside of their main business and working for people that were buying, from somebody else. And so I joined this company, applied, did the classic, like nothing. But I really wanted this job. It sounded, like something that could be really great, actually like blossom my asset protection career. And, it seemed like this company was just on the verge of exploding. Initially, after I got on, their sales were, really good. And yeah, they were putting their money where their mouth was. They had all these great dreams to be this nationally known organization. And while now they've, fixed their presence on Google search results to be towards the top, still hardly anybody's ever heard about them. And now that I live on the East Coast, this area is saturated with HVAC companies and wholesalers and people that even this company used to go through to get units before they had their own means of buying straight from a manufacturer. And so it's just no wonder no one has heard about these people. So anyway, I took the job that seemed promising and ended my almost 6-year career with the large grocery store chain. Learned a lot in both jobs. Totally, appreciate my time with them. But the crazy part about working from home versus working in the office is I thought that I was an introvert. I thought, I don't really like talking to a lot of people. I get along really well with management types, and I'm very business oriented and professional. I definitely am one of the best, from what I've heard from managers and other people in various companies, I'm really good at, proper emails and communication methods and whatnot for in a corporate environment. Those are the skills you can't really teach. You got them or you don't. It kind of comes with experience and, standing firm on things that that you can and should, and then also, looking for middle ground on things that maybe you don't have as much leverage on, but also you see the urgency in the person's request. So joining this remote work from home, all remote company, read, some interesting things on their website. It was like, oh, we've got this corporate office in Chicago and we have beer days. And it sounded like, there was a period around 2009 where that was kind of a thing of companies having like beer Fridays and you just kind of all let your hair down and whatnot. I never was part of a company that did that. I don't know that I really would want to be part of a company that did that because I don't like to drink around my coworkers or managers or anything because, loose lips sink ships. And that goes for your personal career and, the outcome of a company. So, but it sounded like it had this great environment and they were just transitioning to a remote culture. And I was like, obviously they know how to make people happy to work for them. Like, this looks really cool. So come to find out, I don't know when that culture ended or whatnot, but nobody that I was working with had ever kind of experienced that. So it was kind of like this, did it ever really exist? Or is it just some fluffy tactic to get people to be like, ooh, this looks like a hip young company to work for kind of a thing. So it kind of was like, that's odd. And then somehow they changed the job title that I applied to. They changed it from asset protection logistics specialist to a quality assurance specialist. Basically doing the same thing, but they changed the name. It's like, I'm not quality assurance. Quality assurance usually is, testing products and being on the ground, looking for issues, solving things. But this is like a remote security role, watching cameras, investigating things, looking at reports. And there was a quality assurance team that would listen to customer phone calls and grade chats and, give feedback to employees. And I was like, that's more QA, not what I'm doing. But here I was being mysteriously lobbed into a QA department. Little bait and switch, it seemed. But that wasn't enough of a flag for me to jump. Or, I was like, whatever. They're growing. They're finding their way. as time went on, more flags came out. It was like, this is kind of weird. So obviously they have the name of the company that they're known publicly by, the company that you go to buy from them and that they sell through, and their channels of everything. But then there's like 5 different companies or legal entities that represent them on the back end. There's a whole nother company that operates the warehouse facilities. Another company is the name of the in-house product line that is manufactured by frankly, a competitor, someone that they actually buy from for other units, but makes an in-house, air quote, brand. They don't actually do any manufacturing themselves. But they pay for the rights to have a custom designed system with, personalized badging and whatnot. So there's the name of that company. And then all of your paychecks come from yet another company, which is like a hodgepodge of some names of people that founded the company, I guess. Whole thing was super weird. But yet again, they had this idea of being like well-known, like Mitsubishi or something. We want to be this national brand under one, whatever. It's like, then you're going to need to ditch one of the names. Either your in-house brand needs to be switched to the name that you go by publicly, or you need to ditch the name that you have gone by since founding to the name of this other thing. Massive identity crisis at the very least. Like total, what the hell situation. But I continued to work for them. I gave them, my all, poured everything I could into this. Young, developing asset protection security department. They had, one facility down in Kentucky that they built themselves. They had built it like a year or two prior, and we're really proud of it. Gorgeous looking building. Definitely a gem in their hard work. They earned that for sure. But the staff there, holy cow, I wouldn't hire them for a car wash. But they were the bee's knees out of the whole organization. Person ahead of receiving had been fired, from what they said 7 years prior, and they took pity on the poor man and admonished the manager who, in my mind, rightfully called out the situation and got rid of a bad apple, brought him back, and obviously that manager that fired them is gone, and that person's still there and, being the crusty old person that they are. But that aside, they also had inconsistencies. They wanted, rules developed and policies developed and standards. And clearly there wasn't any real framework of things before it got there. I remember seeing people, clock in an hour and a half, or even half an hour before their manager. And it's like, wait, they're clocking in and then going to the bathroom and just kind of hanging out. And then they would be sent home early. And then I'm like, so they're getting paid a full 8-hour day, but only working like 6 actual hours and getting essentially 2 hours of free money just to sit there on their duff. And so finally I was like, how come this warehouse doesn't have standardized scheduling like the rest of them? And so much was like, oh, it's up to the local manager to decide. I'm like, that's a massive red flag for any business owner. Granted, I'm not a business owner, but I'm very business entrepreneurial minded. And if I was the head of a company and I saw the shit that I was seeing, pardon my French, that wouldn't have flown. I would have severed some heads immediately. Some management should have been fired immediately, but they weren't. Oh, it's okay. We know what we're doing, or we didn't see it that way. Wasted people. But things got straightened out. We got all of the warehouses aligned. I helped build out some policies and standards. We increased some safety standards. They went from being, reliably horrible and unsafe to being massively reliable across all locations, with like forklift safety inspections, dock locking procedures. they really did turn around. They didn't do it, happily or willingly. They didn't like that, the guy behind the cameras was watching them. They didn't know me, but they knew that I was seeing all their shit and calling it out. And I was kind of a force that really helped the top of the company, the executives, really build more in the direction of what they said they wanted. They wanted a national company that was safe and sustainable, reliable, and a worthwhile place to be. But then the money just stopped being where the mouth was. And, they would come to me and be like, what do you think about this person's whatever? What are you seeing? Initially, I'd provide, feedback and facts, and they would go with it. And I ended up getting a couple people fired because of things that I saw and, the standards and values that I held firm to what these business owners said they wanted from me in their company and what these bad actors were doing. And they needed to go. But then eventually, when their best friends who, they had this blind loyalty to, were coming up as the bad actors, the final bad actors, the ones that, would get somebody else to pop up their head and get lobbed off. They were the only ones left, and they weren't wanting to actually take action. Had an employee come in and put on a Confederate flag face mask. We didn't require masks when I started there. But he had a Confederate face mask. To me, a very clear sign of racial ideology, and donned it just during the briefing. Didn't have it on the rest of the day. Didn't wear it any other time, but also put it on right in front of the one and only person of color employee in that facility. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a massive problem. And when I called that out, crickets. Obviously, one of my bosses, the director of warehousing there, he was like, whoa, this is not good. But he didn't feel that he had the clearance or affirmation from the top to actually do something meaningful about this. So we basically both kind of wrote up the whole situation, proposed a meaningful resolution to it, and handed it off to the COO and let HR know about it. And nothing happened. Nothing ever happened. That employee still works there. The manager who was on site and saw it and didn't say anything, I saw him on the camera, looked straight at them with the mask on, still works there. That other employee later on broke into another employee's car with a brand new hire, led the brand new hire to, pull this prank on a departing employee. They broke into his car, stole some stuff out the back, threw stuff on the ground, whatnot. Guess who got fired? The new employee. Not the one who had been with the company for years and had, a clear, defined history of bad behavior, physical intimidation, violence, lying, manipulation, all that crap. And this person, he just misunderstood. But if you were brand new, if you had been with the company less than 7 years, oh, you're being too rebellious, you're being whatever, fire them. No questions asked. But if you were somebody that showed up on the right day 10 years ago, you could essentially burn down the building and nobody would care. We had new people that knocked over massive stacks of units. Those people quickly gone. But the receiving manager, drops a whole massive pile of PTAC units and cost the company a minimum of like $40,000 in product. Plus, it took months for another employee to go through every single unit and assess the damage and potential resale value for fractions of the cost, the person who did all that, caused all that, was responsible for all that inventory management and safety, still employed. Still the bee's knees. Everybody loves him, but he hates technology. And behind the scenes, he would constantly call out how he hated AI and hated the new computer systems. And, oh, it was great when we had stacks of paper and pen and pencil and we had to just go be physical and just ship it out. He didn't like, actually having responsibility of taking care of inventory and actually, first in, first out, serialization, all that jazz. So it became very clear that I wasn't actually a consistent force of good or reason within the company. I was an on-demand, I guess, police force. They wanted to just use me whenever it suited their needs to get rid of somebody. Even though I'd call out, legitimate things that singed me from my core ethical standpoint of bad behavior and misconduct. No, they didn't care about that. But if they had an agenda about someone or decided, you know what, this month we want to trim our budget a little bit. Who can we go after? Conveniently, then it was, oh, what are you seeing on this? Who are you seeing on that? And it's like, no. Standards have to be applied standardly all the time. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to work for your company. And I kept calling out, isn't it interesting how we get these great people to come work for the company, but then they eventually stop performing. They eventually start becoming sluggish and blending in with the crowd. And before you know it, they've gone even further and they're checking out, and pretty soon they're calling out, and then they never come back because they go get a job somewhere else and they're gone. But who do we have that stays time and time again? It's the legacy people, the people that they refused to actually admonish and take care of when the bad behavior was displayed back all those years ago. And consistently. And when you're a brand new person and you come into an organization and you see, they say, we stand firmly on these values. These are what we have a zero tolerance policy on this, zero tolerance on that, zero tolerance on this. But then when you see they only apply zero tolerance to people that are under 3 years of employment, and then after, if you've been here longer than 3 years, you can do anything, that undermines your structure as a company. That undermines anything that anyone of any good moral character wants to be attached to. And of course they're going to leave. Of course you're not going to be able to find a replacement manager in Kentucky. Of course you're going to have all these problems. Turn over tons of staff out west. Turn over staff in the Northeast. Dishonest practices. And then quietly overnight, the company, relocated itself to Kentucky. Probably a better tax situation. Who knows? That's whatever. Nothing against the people of Kentucky. I wouldn't want to live there. It's quite a gross place, Nice spacious yards, but lots of junk. It's like a hybrid of a tree desert type vibe out there. It's like a wasteland in my mind. But again, to each their own. You find your happiness wherever it may take you down the Ohio River. And the thought of that, like, I don't want to work for a Kentucky-based company when, all the things that attracted me to this company were very much Chicago in nature, progressive, fighting for the people kind of a thing. Like, I don't want to work for a conservative hick company, but that's what they were backing. That's what they were supporting. And a lot of, the kind of spinning their wheels employees that never got pushed to actually produce to the same level I did. Also, they didn't have the ability to produce that level. It was just kind of like, oh, well, this is what they need. So, like, if you're just kind of a deadbeat living out in the middle of Oklahoma, this is an awesome job for you. I can see why those people don't look for something better, because there is nothing better unless you want to go work at Dollar General for, pennies. And quite frankly, some of these people, if they can stay in their jams and, enjoy every workday sitting on the filthy office chair they've had for the last 20 years, more power to them. But that's just not my lifestyle. That's not who I am. Pretty soon, it became clear that I didn't have as many personal boundaries as I should have. And I was working my ass off. Again, only like having 40 hours a week, but there were days I'd clock out and work another hour. There was this weird mindset of like, oh, we got to do all this extra work. And like everyone was expected to do the work of 2 or 3 people, but make it look like you can get it all done in a 40-hour work week. So many people were knowingly and unknowingly working off the clock, working on their free time. Because when you don't have the separation of leaving your house and going, to a workplace, you're not leaving work at work and home at home. Suddenly it's, oh, let me finish this real quick. And then you've cut into your dinner time. You cut in time with your spouse and your family. Pretty soon you're too tired. Excuse me. Had to clear my throat right there. But pretty soon I was only leaving the house once a week to go grocery shopping. That is not healthy. Literally, I spent most of my life during this time on the second floor. I literally walked between my bedroom and the home office. Maybe 20 steps. Versus when I worked in the corporate office, yes, it was a office situation, and yeah, you're stuck at the desk for the 8 hours, but I could take breaks. I could walk to the break room. I could go walk around the set store. Somebody else was doing the work when I could step away. But this company had people who were just so inefficient and not self-starters, constantly needing babysitting and guidance, that if you walk away, fine, you're going to have to do all the work when you come back. So you might as well just, bear it and grin, for lack of a better phrase, and just get the work done so you can have something of time to yourself afterwards. But anyway, so they also love to recycle people. I would have loved to have an actual, I laid out a plan. One of the first years I was there, I was like, here's what I envision for my department: asset protection, an on-site arm, all these things. I put them in my review every year, my feedback of my vision for what I wanted to do. And eventually they did give me an employee. They recycled her from customer service. Apparently she didn't get along with the people over there. They didn't like her. She didn't really fit that role or what they needed well enough. So instead of, letting her go because she couldn't do the job that she was hired for to their satisfaction any longer, they moved her over to me. And I remember my original department boss was there, and they're like, oh, well, we'll move her over here and make her Everett's problem. And they chuckled, and I'm like, maybe some inside joke. Little did I know that would be fortuitous about what I would later see in that company. So I trained this employee who had no background in asset protection or security cameras or systems or anything like I did. I taught her how to do my job. And to her credit, she did a great job, all things considered. She worked her butt off. She rose to the occasion. She, obviously wasn't me. They wanted me there all the time. So if, they wanted someone who, if I walked away, basically my performance and quality was still there. You're not going to get that without me. I'm sorry to say, I'm not like most people. I'm better than most people you can hire. So she did her best. She asked tough questions. She, like I said, did a good enough job for the whole time. But then she started asking some questions about things going on in Kentucky, made a phone call that I was not privy to. I don't know what was said. I don't know what inspired her to make the phone call. But basically, she made a phone call to a vendor. And while I was on vacation, I think this was while I was moving across country, literally had no office to be able to sign into, like it's in the back of my car. So I'm completely offline. She makes a rogue phone call and does some other things that upset the higher ups. And suddenly, when I get back online now from Pennsylvania after moving from Idaho, there's all this additional scrutiny, and they're doing pretend things, and she didn't call this out, and you guys didn't see this, and you're responsible for the performance of the department. And so I was like, okay, well, we got to, try to do this. And I was trying to foster that growth, and then I was getting pushback from her, not wanting to play the games or jump through the hoops. And I get that. It definitely, seemed that way, because things that we were suddenly being asked to call out, like employees dumping trash into the trash dumpsters, 2 years prior, when I legitimately called that out, because I was like, hey, this looks weird. Why are they dumping in trash? Universally told, we don't care about that. Nobody cares. But then suddenly, at the drop of a hat, we care. But originally, the stance was, we don't care about employees dumping things into the dumpster unless it's something massive or it causes the dumpster to be overfilled and thus incur an additional fee. So, dumping 5 kitchen bags of trash was still concerning to me, but had largely been dismissed as allowable because whatever, who cares? We're a small, carefree company. Anyway, they kept me out of the loop on a lot of things, asked my advice on things like their VP of facility design and acquisition helped build the warehouse in Kentucky. He built the warehouse in Kentucky without air conditioning. It's humid down there, guys. Like, hello? Cardboard doesn't stand up to the elements very well if it gets too saturated. And a lot of product damage and falls happen because of an incompetent fool at the top of the company. Someone who should have known better, who should have had the experience to accurately lead a company down the right path. But that path wasn't presented, followed, whatever. And then, after the place was built, they had to cut into the membrane roof and retroactively install air conditioning. Gee, what a bright idea. So glad you have an incompetent vice president of chaos. And anyway, and then, basic security things were happening. Things in the alarm system weren't working properly. Doors weren't being secured properly. Truck drivers were coming in after hours, and it's like, hello, why are we not able to, like, this to me is basic security. I don't have the facilities air conditioning management experience of working at like a credit card company like this guy does, but I've been around the block in physical security and corporate security to know you have to put your money where your mouth is. If you, in eyes of security, if you want the door to stay secure, you need to buy something better than what you would put on your house. There are higher quality, more expensive, commercial grade pieces of equipment for a reason. Residential applications do not apply in commercially designed establishments. Just throwing that out there. So, security is something you do not get to have high quality at a low cost. You will pay for what you get. If you want a better camera system, you have to pay for a better camera system. If you want better employees, you have to pay for better employees. You don't get top-notch security at Allied Barton, Allied Universal prices. $10 an hour. And a different dude showing up every day. Not going to happen. Been there, done that. Again, I'm the outlier to that mold. I was that Allied Barton guy. I was that consistent person that showed up to 9 different facilities. Any shift of the day. Day shift, swing shift, grave shift. Monday through Friday, Saturday and Sunday. I knew what was required by the management of every facility. I knew what was required by every shift. You have to pay for good people, or they will quickly leave and you'll be stuck with the crap that you harbor. And enjoy it while you have it. So they didn't tell me that either they were upset at my employee for whatever reason, or they were concerned about money flow. Nothing. I went from complimenting my employee, like catching something, and I was in between, touch bases with other managers, working on projects that I was doing administratively, and being like, hey, you did a great job. Thanks for calling that out. And then 5 minutes later, my cell phone's ringing, and it's her, and she goes, F you. And I'm like, what? Excuse me? And she's like, you know what I'm talking about. F you. You knew this. Basically accused me of colluding or being in the know and not telling her. And she's like, I just got fired. And she was just so spicy and just vile against me. And I had no clue. I was caught off guard by all this. And I get that we all have upset and we don't want to trust that some people legitimately don't know before something happens. But if someone says, I didn't know anything about this, you have to trust them if you want to continue having a conversation or a relationship. But she accused me of, being in the know and duping her and not warning her ahead of time or something, or giving her a chance to get out or save things. She was just mad because she went from being in the middle of working to all of her systems signed out and she was fired and no access to anything. It's like, sorry, if you have emails that you wanted to save, you should have saved them when you thought to save them. You're not going to just have access to them for years later. So they let her go. I had to break off ties with this person. She was real sweet, but again, she was not somebody that I would normally be friends with on a regular basis. And I don't go to work for friends. I've told that to many people that I've worked with in the past and other jobs. If you do your job, we can be friends. But the moment you refuse to do your job and don't do your job properly, or make me do your work, we're not friends. It's strictly business, and I don't care if you get severed or whatever. When I go to work, it's for work, and it's not for socializing. It's not for friends. It's not for good times and great feel goods. And so I had to, break off ties with this person because obviously we're not working together anymore. She lives in Illinois, and I have no further need of this relationship. And frankly, the conversations, even as an employee manager situation, were so, you'd like, all right, well, we got to move on to the next thing, and they would just drag on and drag on. I now didn't have time to do that because I'm having to now do the work of 2 people, my administrative functions plus my employee functions, because my team got fired and I'm the only one with the brain power and skill set to do this. So I didn't have time for these, long drawn out conversations like apparently the rest of the people did at the company. They only did like an hour of work and sat around and ate popcorn, watched movies, and talked to their friends the rest of the day. Some of us actually worked. So let her go. I stepped up, obviously jumped through all the hoops that I could, but it became clear they didn't care about hiring somebody else of higher caliber. And I had poured all of my intellect into training this person that was chosen for me as my employee. I already kind of felt like, it might be time to look for something else because they're not wanting to invest in on-site security measures. They're not wanting to invest in having actual accountable people on site, the managers were complete morons. Nobody cared about anything company related. They'd say whatever they had to at company meetings, but when I watched them the rest of the time, they didn't actually follow company procedures. They didn't care. A lot of people do not like a top-down company structure. But guess what? When it comes to security, sales, and longevity of your business, you have to have a core of central values. There are only a handful of things that logically make sense to be run on a location level basis. If you're running a grocery store and you know that your local community doesn't like the taste of cherry, then fine. The store director can say, I don't want to sell cherry cola, or maybe we'll do the absolute minimum of it, but we're going to up this other flavor because this is really popular here. That is a local level decision. But setting things like, oh, these doors need to be locked, or this alarm needs to be set, or this, these security things need to be done, or you can clock in 5 minutes before your scheduled shift or whatever. Or you have to clock in from the time clock and not from your cell phone, 5 miles away on your way to work. Those are the standards that you have to define as a company and enforce. And you can't be mamsy-pamsy about it and then wonder why the hell your company sucks, why you're losing money left and right, why you have to cut out the bonus program, why you have to start, making it less desirable for your arguably better and more qualified employees to want to work there. And so now that company's left with what they've got, they're trying to, still be a disruptor in the wholesale HVAC business when they started, that was a niche that they filled. They were very cutting edge back in 2002. But now you can buy air conditioners straight from Medea, Goodman, Gree, all of them. And even, Walmart sells them. If you don't want window units, go buy a mini split, go buy whatever. You can go to your HVAC contractor and they can get them for you, or go to Home Depot. There's a company that's selling mini split, head units that go inside and the outdoor compressor units on the shelf. If you want to do the DIY experience with that tactile walk into the store, feel it. Oh, this feels heavy. It feels like the real deal. Go do that. Do it yourself. But don't turn to these weird online companies that, ship it to your house on a pallet and you have to be like, oh, well, I got to figure out how to get this into my garage or whatever. Because these are freight deliveries. They're just dropping them at your driveway. They're not going to haul it in. It's not a company. The company's not coming to your house. They're going to send it with a third party who doesn't give a shit where your air conditioner sits for the next month or two while you figure out how to install it or try to find a contractor to install it. And then when it comes time to exercise, the free return and money back guarantee, that's great, but hopefully you haven't taken off any of that shrink wrap. Hopefully it didn't storm and hail and damage the equipment. Hopefully you protected the shipment and left it kind of bundled as much as possible instead of looking at all the pieces while you tried to figure it out, because now you're going to be responsible for having to make it one pallet back and pay for return shipping, and good luck. That's the game that you played. So suffice it to say, I don't know what entire point I was trying to make from this, but basically I went from enjoying working at home, and there were those beautiful initial days in the beginning when there was a big team and there was happiness. Actually, I enjoyed working, even though I did the asset protection side, I still was in touch with the other QA people and enjoyed talking to them. They added a lot of, around the country flair. I learned a lot of things. It kind of opened up my head to the idea of moving to the East Coast. People out here are different than out West for many different reasons. there are things out west that don't exist out back east, but there's also things in the East Coast that don't exist out west. Neither one is better in my mind. I feel like there's far more diversity in natural life on this side versus out west. You know, if you can't irrigate it, it's not going to grow out west. So just going to throw that out there. If anyone wants to leave Pennsylvania for, you know, Nevada or Kentucky, you got to bring the water to the plant out there versus up in the Northeast. It rains 5 times more than in Idaho, in Pennsylvania compared to Idaho. And the trees will just grow. And guess what? On top of that, with all that moisture, the trees also just tend to break because they get saturated and kind of rot because there's more humidity here. So there's pros and cons. It's visually more appealing and you've got a lot more like kind of old school community vibes, but out west, concrete is king. And so is the cash that comes with, you know, people who couldn't get a modern foothold in Silicon Valley, but maybe Sun Valley is where they're going to be able to build their dream and the people will come. So no matter where you work, whether you work in a physical office or you work from home, you need to define your values. You need to define your boundaries. Do not work for anyone for free. Do not compromise on non-negotiables. You know, if they say for years, hey, we'd like you to move to this really desolate, trashy area, and for years you say, oh, no, I could never do that. And then eventually when the company's collapsing and you say, okay, let's do that, instead of, you know, potentially having to start all over and finding a better, more meaningful career path. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for everything. And if they can get you to compromise on your values today, imagine what they're going to get you to compromise on tomorrow. And what happens when they decide, oh, thanks for playing the game. Good luck. And now your world has been completely changed at their demand and behest. What do you have left? Now you have to reinvest at a loss to get back to where you were previously, or to, you know, reconnect in ways that you had before. It's not good. And that is, you know, the high cost of a lack of boundaries and principles. Make sure that you're not selling yourself short. Make sure that you're only doing what you want to do, what you would defend your resume for, what you would defend your character on. If you wouldn't do it as a person, or if it was your company, if it's something you wouldn't do, don't do it. Too many people are like, well, gotta do what I gotta do to make ends meet. Do you know how many places are hiring out there? Do you know how crappy this world actually is when you really think about it? There's things that have popped up for the 3rd, 4th, 5th time in my lifetime. It's going to keep repeating. And guess what? Every day you're going to be able to find another job until you can work no more, and then you'll just die because there's no more Medicaid, no more Medicare. They're cutting all the social programs that, you know, were paid for by our tax dollars. But yeah, go ahead and sell yourself to a company today. You know? Keep your values intact. Keep your friends close. Don't do things today that you'll regret tomorrow or even in 2 years. And learn from today. Learn from the elements. You know, push yourself into the discomfort of change. Start over. Don't be afraid to become that entry-level person again. Because I can tell you from personal experience, having been at the bottom, for many years, and then seemingly being at the top and seeing, they're still not doing what should be done ethically, responsibly to the people at the bottom. So many people start out that way and like, oh, I'll never forget where I came from. And then they get to a certain spot and they're like, well, this is as good as it's going to get for me. So I guess I'm going to start playing their game. And then they start selling themselves short and doing what they swore many years earlier that they would never do. And I don't know about you, but I am not a person who goes back on my word to others, let alone myself. And if I get duped into going down one of those paths, the second I realize it and the second I come up with a plan B, I'm out. Because I am not for sale. Nobody can buy my values away from me. And you have to be the same. Anyway, a little bit of a rambling podcast, but yeah, if you need an air conditioner this blisteringly hot summer, stick to the people you know. Stay with your community. If you're in Boise, find a local HVAC company. If you're in Pennsylvania, drive up 309. There's a lot of, legacy looking mom and pop air conditioning places that have the cool vintage signs. They've been around for decades. Sure, they might cost a little bit more, but guess what? You're going to have a professional install the system. You're going to have a professional make sure that the electrical connection is not going to burn your house down. Everything will be up to code. DIY sounds great until you lose everything. Just because you may save $1,000 or $200 or $500 doing it yourself, ordering from some, internet company, go with the pros that you know. Go with who your friends have. What if that system breaks down? Who's going to fix it? Most places have a warranty. Like if you buy a system through a local company that's been around and then it breaks down, they'll come honor that warranty. If you're buying from a third party, first off, good luck convincing them to install it because they don't totally know what it is or where it came from. Sure, they may sell something similar if you buy an actual known brand versus an in-house brand of the online company, but there's no incentive for a professional to service your system because they didn't sell it to you. They don't have to honor the warranty because they didn't offer the warranty. You didn't buy it through them. And they're going to be like, well, why don't you call the internet company to handle your needs? And the internet company is going to tell you, we don't have physical staff. We just have a bunch of people who answer phones who are retired HVAC tech people that work from their house. It's 2025. If you want to do certain things DIY, find a video on YouTube. Do it yourself. Go buy from a brick and mortar. Talk to a local HVAC company. Say, hey, I want to buy a system, but I want to install it myself. See if they'll sell it to you. If you have to buy something online, then fine. Go through Amazon or whatever. But you own that choice. And the interest payments could be through the roof. All right. Well, I've rambled on enough. To close out, I now work a job where I'm physically back in a building. I'm doing security. I'm learning things. I have learned from the roles that I've had that I mentioned previously. I thank them for those educational experiences. And someday, when I am the head of an organization, mark my words, our policies will be the most fair and standardized across the board. Every single employee will know that I care about them at the bottom level if they care about me at the top level. If they do what I say, hey, this is the mission, vision, and values of our company, if you do XYZ, this is your career path here. If someone does those bare minimums, You owe them that promise. But you can't keep dangling the carrot or wonder why, every time you change the goalpost, why people become disincentivized. If you're going to run a business, your goal is sales. So if you meet the bare minimums of sales, that's all that you should matter or care about. But the second you start being like, oh, well, we're running a business, but we also want to be a tech company and develop our own in-house inventory system. Guess what? You don't have the staff or the backing or, you're buckling in many ways, but you're wanting to play tech developer. Go buy a scalable, turnkey point of sale inventory system and make do with that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel just because you want to build your own car.
Thank you for listening to Everything with Everett. Connect with Everett and other listeners on Facebook and Twitter at Everett Podcast. Everett would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts by emailing mystory@everettpodcast.com. You can also leave a voicemail or send a text message to 208-391-2808. Choose to listen, speak with kindness, and have a great day.